Morning, guys. It's Drew here. Quick video blog. I wanted to talk briefly about the crazy things that are going on in Michigan and are going on in local governments throughout the United States in general. And I wanted to talk about, these protests and how culture kind of relates to these things and how culture kind of influences these things. I see a lot of people saying, oh, if black people did that, if we did that, we'd be shot instantly, you know? And people keep saying that, and it's like, okay, well, you have to look at the reasons why, okay? Number one, I think one of the most important factors is that black people are only 13% of the population, and an even smaller percentage are willing to revolt against tyranny with firearms. In general, black people are not willing to fight for their freedoms in this country. For the most part, I'm saying. They're not willing to do it. Most black people in this country, I'm talking about, I'm not saying everybody. I'm talking about, the cities and places that are heavily populated by black people. Most of these places, people will gladly shoot each other over some sneakers. People will shoot each other over some drugs and some territory. People will shoot each other over, domestic stuff, girlfriends, love triangles, things like that. But when it comes to actually resisting tyranny, they take a back seat and they say things like, oh, it's white privilege. They're able to walk around with guns. And if black people did that, they would be shot. First of all, that's not true. Okay. Look at what happened in Waco. In Waco, those people were burned to death. You know what I mean? They were burned to death. Okay. But if you look at, in contrast, what happened in Bundy Ranch, those people were organized and those people were able to successfully repel the federal government. Okay, so it's something that you got to look at. Now, it's something that if you really want to make this argument, it's something that you got to study. It's something that you got to look into, okay? So let's go further in this mindset. My theory is that brown cultures, yes, including even Nigerian culture, because I'm Nigerian, brown culture, to a large degree, because of the collectivist nature of the culture, and the predisposition to survival and resourcefulness, I think that there exists a vulnerability to tyranny in a lot of brown cultures. Because if you see a lot of brown cultures, with the exception of maybe Muslims in Afghanistan, a lot of brown cultures, once the first shot is fired, once the first, act of violence is made, many of them will retreat and go home. How many of them will keep shooting until all of them expire? Not many people. Many of them will retreat. The difference is with the white cultures, there's a section of them that do not retreat. There's a section of them, I don't know, I can't say all of them, because if you look at certain white nations like Sweden and other places, they are susceptible to tyranny too, they allow it too in certain white nations and whatnot. But if you look at there's a large section of white people that do not allow themselves to be enslaved at all. And as a result, they will revolt, they will engage in revolution until they've won. And the end of it's already written. So if you understand this, your body may expire, but at the end of the day, you cannot crush the spirit of freedom. You cannot. It's already woven into the fabric of life that spirits must be free. Free will is a part of everything. Free will is a part of, the rule book. So you can oppress people. You can create acts of violence and tyranny on people, but you cannot enslave people who are not willing to be enslaved. You can take away things. You can, remove rights. You can, impact them in those ways. You can make their living very difficult, but you cannot, enslave free people. You cannot enslave people who, do not give their consent to be enslaved. You can't. You can only enslave people who give their consent to be enslaved. Now, don't get me wrong. It can get to a point where if you do not comply, you'll be killed. Okay? But that's still a choice. You're still choosing to die than to live in enslavement. So it's still a choice. It's not a great choice, but it's still a choice. And most people, to preserve their own life, because of the fear of the unknown, and none of us really know who we are until we get there. Because of the fear of the unknown and the fear of loss, most people will submit to a type of slavery because they fear the unknown. They fear the unknown of death. They fear losing their lives. They fear, losing, not being able to be present for people who are still here. And they put the utmost importance on the physical matters of this world. You know what I mean? The only thing that will kind of liberate you from that type of bondage to this world is having high spiritual disposition. Meaning that you look at death differently. You look at this life as finite, because it truly is. We're all going to cross over at some point in time. But, we all make efforts to prolong that time, to push that time further into the future. But it's inevitable for all of us. We're all going to go there at some point. And so, back to what I was saying, the white guys, they will protest and protest and protest physically, blood, sweat, tears. They will do it until they just cannot be enslaved. And then society will fall apart because governments need the compliance of their citizens in order to be tyrannical. You see what I'm saying? White guys, I mean, if you look at Bundy Ranch, what happened? Dude, this was over land. This was over land, and the militia started showing up, and the federal government started backing off. So you cannot tell me that black people and black revolt and black revolution is the same. It's not. It's not. For whatever reason, we're always the last people to know. For whatever reason, we're always the last people to adopt these practices, and it's just, I'm not saying one culture is better than another, but I'm saying that certain cultures are just better at certain things. You can't argue with me when I say, for the most part, black people are better at basketball. For the most part, black people are better at boxing. For the most part, black people, we have these fast twitch muscle fibers that allow us to react with better explosive energy than white people in some sports. When it comes to football, doesn't always seem to be the case. But when it comes to basketball, where fast pivoting and agility is needed, that seems to be the case. When it comes to boxing, many of the top boxing champs are, Mexican. They're either Hispanic or they're black. It's been that way for a long time. I don't know. I don't remember when we've seen the last, white boxing champion. It's been a while. It's been a long time. And I guess the Klitschko brothers are Russian, but I'm just saying, in general, like, these are observations. I'm not meant to say one culture is better than another. It's just that I think certain cultures are better at certain things. Like, black people tend to be better at dancing. They tend to be better at certain sports, But when it comes to revolution, when it comes to revolting, when it comes to banding together and fighting for your freedoms and not backing down, you can't tell me that white people don't have that shit on lock. You can't. It's just an observation. Don't get offended from watching this video. Don't call me a sellout. It's a blatant, objective observation. Look throughout history. Even Chinese people are susceptible to being enslaved. Chinese people, under Mao, constantly, Mexican people, black people under several different tyrants, currently and in the past, but white people, they won't allow it. They won't allow it. And you know what? That's what has made this nation free. That's what has made this nation where everybody wants to flock to. because the white people will not allow it. It's their culture, it's their way of thinking, it's their way of life that preserves this kind of freedom. Let's be realistic now. Let's be realistic. This is not a nation. Like, people could say all they want, this is a nation of immigrants. That's not true. Like, we came here when the freedoms were already established, and we were also, I'm not gonna, discount slavery, because slavery was a real thing. But that's my point. You could say 400 years, 400 years, 400 years, whatever you want. At the end of the day, enough of us complied with it to the point where it became an issue. Now, me personally, I'm my last name is Nigerian. I'm Nigerian. My family has a history of resisting enslavement. My ancestors, at least. Us descendants that are here, I still feel it in my spirit. I still feel it in my soul. I still feel it in my body. I feel it in every fiber of my being. I've always, in one way or another, at least fought for my own freedom. I wanted time freedom. I wanted financial freedom. I wanted social freedom. And eventually, with hard work, with effort, with diligence, with determination, I was able to achieve all of it. I was able to get all of it. Today, that's what I'm experiencing. I have all those freedoms, And today, I'm noticing that these things are under threat. Not directly. It's not like the government is aiming directly at me. But the things that they're doing is aimed at free peoples. I mean, if I wasn't self-employed, if I didn't own a business that would insulate me from this, if I didn't have that faith in God and believe that my spirit was free and all this stuff, where would I be right now? Thank God. God gave me a career and a business that's not impacted by this pandemic. Not impacted. In fact, it's even doing better during this pandemic. But where would I be if I was completely and totally dependent on the system? Where would I be if I had a job and I couldn't report to that job? Where would I be if I had to wait for the government to tell me when I could open my business? Where would I be? Right now, I'd probably be in jail because I would resist. I would still open up. Police would show up, and then I wouldn't comply. Then they'd show up again, I wouldn't comply. Eventually, they'd put me in jail. Or I'd be stacked with heavy fines, but I'd fight it. I'd fight it because it's not right. It's not legal. It's not lawful. It's unconstitutional. I mean, we're not called in this society to live as slaves, and that's pretty much a choice that anybody and everybody makes. You make that choice. It's not something that is just put on you that you must accept. We are free human beings. We are free at the end of the day. Don't get me wrong. Your choices could be limited. It could come down one day to a choice between death and a choice between, enslavement. But when that choice comes, I just don't think I could live in slavery. I mean, even if I were to comply with it for a little bit, out of some desire to survive, eventually it would fall apart because I'm not built for it. I'm not built for slavery, dude. Eventually I'm going to do something rash. I'm going to do something immoral. I'm going to do something crazy, try to take the life of an oppressor, and probably end up going down with them, probably end up being killed as a result. I'm just simply saying, like, as a man, you have to make your stand. You have to stand on certain principles, and it's about those principles. If your principle is to survive no matter what, if your principle is to preserve your life no matter what, if your principle is all about survival, you'll do anything for it. You'll give up your rights, you'll give up your children, you'll give up everything you've earned, you'll give up everything just to survive. That is not where I place my values. And there might be some people who will think I'm crazy for that. But that's not how I live my life. Living in fear. What a joke. And it doesn't mean I'm a tough guy. I'm no tougher than the next guy. The simple fact is that I place more importance on the spirit than I do on the physical. Always. The physical comes last for me. Okay? So I cannot live in the spirit of fear. I can't. No matter how hard I try, I can't do it. Eventually, my spirit is going to give way. I'm going to revolt. I'm going to fight. And when that happens, if I'm outgunned, I'll probably lose. Point is, I will refuse to live in fear, and you should too. You should too if you're capable of it. If you have it in your spirit, if you have it in your genetics, that calling. I don't think that this thing can be taught. I think it's something that's internally inside you. You know, it's inside you. Whether you're going to live your life on your knees or whether you're going to stand and die on your feet, that's inside you. That's not something that can be taught. That's something that's inside you. And if it's inside you, you cannot resist it because it just pulls on your heartstrings. It pulls on you. It pulls on every fiber of your being to resist. And that's exactly what I'm going to do if it comes down to it. And I hope those of you who are watching this, I hope you guys have that in you too. Peace.